There has been a lot of talk online about if book publishing is becoming like the fast fashion industry. And I do think there is a valid point to be made there, right? There does seem to be an uptick in books that have been published with less quality, a lot of editing issues that are tropey and cliche and that have like pacing issues, right? Just books that are burdened with issues, okay? But I would argue that this is not an isolated phenomenon. This is not the only time this has happened. I would argue that this is a cyclical pattern that we have seen before. I think every couple of years there is one big genre, right? There's a genre that's really popular. It kind of explodes in popularity. Usually that genre is decided by one really big book, and then more books come out that are of that genre, but that just seem not as good, or they seem like derivative of that book. So for example, I would argue that the genre that defined the like mid 2000s to the early 2010s was probably paranormal fantasy YA romance. Okay, so we saw that off the back of Twilight. I think of Twilight as maybe the biggest book of the era. And we saw a lot of books being published that kind of had that similar premise, right? With like vampire boyfriends, werewolf boyfriends, even fairy boyfriends. Me personally, I think of like Shiver, Crescendo, The Iron King, right? Books that kind of had a similar premise, even if they weren't necessarily the same thing as Twilight, they kind of still follow the general idea of like, we're focusing in on a pretty average girl who's dating a boy that is like a creature. Okay, he's a creature. He's like a vampire or werewolf or something. And then from the late 2000s to maybe the mid 2010s, right? So maybe around like 2017, 2018, we saw the rise of dystopians. I think the rise of dystopians came off the back of The Hunger Games, right? The Hunger Games was huge. And then there came so many books that were dystopians published right after that. Divergent, Matched, The Selection. And with these genres that get so monumentally popular, publishers want to publish more of it so that they can sell more books, because that's what they want to do. They want to make money. And the way to make money is to publish what is popular. So after The Hunger Games, you know, Divergent, Matched, The Selection, those are all published. And maybe in the beginning people were fine with it. People really liked Divergent, right? People loved Divergent. But as time has worn on, and even at the time, there was some animosity around some of these series, right? Like I know for sure that Matched, even though a lot of people liked it, there were also a lot of people who started critiquing it and saying, well, this is kind of like derivative, and it's just kind of hopping on the dystopian train just because it knows dystopian is popular, and it really has some pacing issues, like it really needs to be edited more. Like it really seemed that publishers were kind of publishing dystopians without a lot of regard for actual quality. Instead, they were looking for something that would sell. The same thing with, I think, you know, in the 2000s after Twilight, people wanted paranormal romance and publishers were willing to give them that, even if it was a lower quality. And I think that is exactly what we're seeing now with romantasy. I think the romantasy genre was really sparked off after A Court of Thorns and Roses was published in 2015, right? And maybe romantasy took a little time to get the ball rolling. But after like 2018, 2019, romantasy was the genre. Jennifer L. Armentrout, you know, she was releasing her shit with like the fucking names that are basically the same as A Court of Thorns and Roses. It's always like a court of shit and piss, a court of blood and ash, a sword that cuts me, you know? Like these names that all sound the same. That is fundamentally what I'm talking about here. Jennifer L. Armentrout releases her series, which I think is like From Blood and Ash. All the stuff that Carissa Broadbent is publishing, right? Daughter of No World, Serpent of Wings and Night, Fourth Wing. Fourth Wing is the romantasy right now. It's the romantasy. And I think what we're seeing right now is just the same thing that has happened before with other genres. Publishers have noticed that romantasy is the big genre and want to publish more of that because they know it will sell. Even if they have to push it out faster, right? With Iron Flame. Iron Flame came out so soon after Fourth Wing that it kind of seemed almost ridiculous to think that it had enough time to be edited and properly looked over. And people argue that it just didn't get that time, that it needed to be edited more. And it probably did. Let's be honest, it probably did. But like, we're seeing that. Books are being rushed, like Iron Flame. Books are just being like pumped out because they know that's what people want. And people are willing to write it as well. So that's generally the idea. I think that this fast fashionification of book publishing isn't an isolated phenomenon. I think it's it's cyclical, right? I think it has happened before, and it will probably happen again in the future when another big genre blows up, right? But romantasy will stick around for at least a while. And of course, if you like romantasy, this isn't meant to like rag on you, right? Like, it's a popular genre for a reason. People like it for a reason. Yes, publishers are probably pumping out these books at a rate that is probably not sustainable. But there's nothing wrong with being excited for these books or wanting to read them. It's a genre you enjoy, and you should be able to enjoy it. I mean, that's why they're publishing them, because people like it. People like it, so you should read it. I think one of the reasons, too, why people kind of see it as this isolated new thing is because there are a lot of people in the book community who have not been part of the book online community for a long time, right? They're relatively new, and they maybe haven't read that much in the past, or they haven't read since they were children, right? There are a lot of new readers who maybe haven't experienced this before. And maybe I'm wrong, okay? Maybe this isn't the right answer, and maybe this is an isolated incident. I don't know. But it is something that I feel like has happened before. If you have any thoughts, you can leave your comments down below. And again, this is just my personal theory. It might not be right. But it is a pattern that I see, and maybe it's not the right pattern, but I don't know. Also, I should mention that these genres don't exist in a vacuum. They have been published before, and they will be published after. So even though dystopian isn't necessarily as popular as it was, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, it still exists. People are still writing it, and people wrote it before The Hunger Games came out, right? Like The Giver came out before The Hunger Games, and so did Uglies. But I think The Hunger Games is what really skyrocketed it into a position of people wanting to read more of it and write more of it. Anyway, have a nice day. Bye!